Greetings, Jessica. Here is your final critique for Art 828, Creative Photography. Looking at your work, I see many interesting pieces and a good use of color in this portfolio of these sort of rural farm elements. And we also get a sense of the old and the rusty and almost a nostalgia for that time. And I think that becomes kind of an interesting thing to think about, is that nostalgia. You mentioned in here you'd like us to be thinking about what was the purpose, who used them then, why were they left behind, this idea of progress and innovation. And innovation can be a good thing, but it can also be a wasteful thing, and it can also sort of be this sort of liquid modernity that doesn't value, things that existed in the past. It doesn't value history. It doesn't value, sort of a religion. And so there's this question in there of why discard? Is innovation better? Is the new better? We find this beauty in this old thing. I also find that there are a lot of photographers, myself included, often feel compelled to look at these rundown buildings or objects, and we find so much interest and beauty in them. And there's a lot of people who do that and create portfolios of that. And then it brings up the question is, okay, so are we doing something new here? Blah, blah, blah. I don't know that we need to answer all of those, but let's start looking at the photographs themselves. And I commented earlier, I really like this photograph. I like it in color. I also like it in black and white, and I'm not sure which is more effective. And that's a great place to be in, because you can pick and choose what works best for your portfolio. Nice texture. I do get this sense of nostalgia in this, and this beautiful object in the rural, and it kind of connects me in a sense. I like the broader landscape I see in this image too. I think I mentioned that too in my comment. I like how I have that old object, but you're connecting me to the land, and it makes me think about farming and its future and its past. And there's a sort of a more industrial farming that's beginning to evolve. I've seen and read about where they take old warehouses and they use grow lights, and they can transform these old warehouses, and then they can control the temperature, and they can control this, and they can grow products year round, and it's kind of interesting to think about. And then there's this positive aspect to that, because then we can have fresh produce locally grown year round. But then what's the impact on the traditional farmer who has these thousands of acres to plant? Will that be as profitable, or will it force more family farms out of business? Or maybe it makes the family farmer stronger? I don't know. So many questions in there, and that's, I think, where we're at with this portfolio. There's a sense of nostalgia. There's a sense of thinking about these and the stories behind them, which for me makes me think about the now and the future and why they were discarded, and is that good or is that bad? Is progress good? Is progress bad? Brings me those big questions. This is another nicely composed image, nice use of the radial. The textures, so often I find, one thing that happens is when we go from color to grayscale, color is such an impactful element that when we get rid of that color, it puts this emphasis on texture. The beauty of this photograph, and a lot of these, are we have both. I have the color and I have the texture, and I'm equally engaged with them, and they push and they pull me. And then, of course, your use of composition is spot on and strong, and it makes me think about something I often say to people in critiquing photography is, the tools of photography have been made to point and shoot, been made easy to get good exposures and good photographs technically. And then if you've got a good sense of composition, it can be very easy to get these images. Now here I think you technically push a little bit further. I don't know if this was intentionally thought out, but I'll give you the benefit of that doubt, where you have a narrower depth of field and the focus is on here, and then back here the wheel, these plants get progressively more soft and out of focus. And I like that. It puts that emphasis here, but then I go here, and then I go here, and I go here. There's a good composition. It moves me around, but also a good use of hierarchy in that terms of depth of field, which is effective in this image. So you're thinking about the camera as this tool, and you're capitalizing on its potential, not just pointing and shooting. But still, that's fairly easy. You don't have to go develop the film and go in the darkroom and try and print these things and struggle through that process. You can just present them on Flickr. And all these things make me think, one, about evolution and about, evolution of industry and our tools, and photography has always been on the edge of utilizing these new tools to make things more accessible to people. It's a very democratic medium, and I love that. And I can also, there's parts of that I don't love, where everyone has a camera and everyone's a photographer, and man, that can be challenging, because everyone can take a great photograph, but can you do it consistently is the thing, to be a professional. And but there's this struggle, I think, between photography and innovation. Just like we're looking at these things and looking back, what are the stories to them, why were they discarded, and which brings me to questions of good. Another nice composition. You're getting more focused in on like the small things as we look at these. I don't get as much interaction with the environment, which I kind of like. Here I do this one. This is actually kind of nice. You could even play with this one even further. I love the softness back here and the sharpness up here. And this is a really beautiful composition. And there's nice color, and there's nice depth of field. And, so you're using that camera really well. I can see that thought process in there. And it comes out really well. So, good job in creating and selecting that image. And then we have here the red and the blue and a little bit of green and a little bit of white, lots of textures. And the dynamics of this, and the curvilinear of this, and the movement of that cylinder back there, and then this verticality and horizontalness of this here. So, there's a really nice composition in all these images, and a really nice use of depth of field here. Again, I love the quality of the out of focus elements here, and they happen fairly quickly. And it creates a nice focal point, but also a nice contrast between the hard textures in here and the softer textures back here, and the nicely composed image and photograph of it here. But what is the value of this evolution? What is the value of no longer having to print images and I can share them so quickly? There's something to be explored there, when I create photographs, I think in terms of print, and I think that's an old school thought process. And I don't know if I can break that in myself, or if I need to, or if I can leave that to that younger generation, where they can consider these questions. But why shouldn't I be considering these questions? But I'm not compelled to consider those questions. But I am compelled to make my students consider those questions, because they are big and important questions, and they relate to technology, and they relate to our sharing of images and who can see them. Is it a small work? Or are they more accessible? And with the internet, we can make them accessible to everyone. But then how, when all these hundreds of people who can take great photographs because they have a simple sense of composition and a tool that can easily help them create those images and upload and share those images, where does that leave photography? And how do you separate yourselves from those hundreds or thousands or millions of people who can take great photographs and share them too? That's a big question. It's not just on you. I often talk about these things. If you go back to these critiques, I often bring up these questions. But looking at your photographs, it gives me the sense of nostalgia. They're well composed. There's a nice use of color. That can be so challenging and difficult in photography, and you do it so well and almost so seamlessly as I look at them. I don't often think like, ooh, that should be black and white, because your use of color is so harmonious, and that is challenging in photography, because the world rarely conforms to our harmonious color schemes that we talk about or strive for in art often. But you're creating here, you've got these lovely, these greens and a little bit of blues, and then some complementaries of reddish browns and orangish browns that creates a sort of double complementary color scheme in the composition. And it's nice, and it's soft, and it's thoughtful, and it's interesting, and it's engaging, and the composition works and moves me around all through this, the sharp and the soft. I think that becomes one of the more defining elements, is the contrast of the sharp and the soft. You have this nice repetition of this form and this form, yet they're different in texture, they're different in color, they're different in size, and so, you really are pushing and pulling me. And I'm getting caught up a lot in this idea of technology. But I can also just look at these photographs in a more modernist, photo-modernist sense, and composition, and almost meditation, and a beauty on the simplicity, and the beauty on abstractness, and the beauty on composition, and movement, and arrangement. And a nostalgia. Looking at this gives me a sense of nostalgia. What are we gaining with this mass production farm system and have this corporate farm system that can just plow thousands of acres and plant thousands of acres with very little human intervention? Is this a good thing for the majority, for the masses, for the family farmer, for the communities these family farmers support? And we're moving away from that, and we see that impact in Nebraska. What is happening to the rural? What is happening to the rural hospital? What is happening to our rural schools, where they have to, we have to close rural schools and then create, connect them to other schools, and then people have to travel farther, and they have less connection to their community, to their schools, to their neighbors, and that all comes back to this more mass production of farmers, where it's more cost efficient to do it on a huge scale. But what do we gain and what do we lose in that process? That's what I think about as I look at these images. And in many ways, I'm like, we need these smaller family farms, these smaller communities, because it spreads that wealth out more, And Nebraska, I think, collectively has made that decision to support the family farm and spread that wealth out in that manner. And I think there's a real value to that. But then at the same time, small farmers cannot ignore the technology, the evolution of seed and GMOs and fertilizer and pesticides that they have to do, in a sense, to get the yield they do to sustain themselves. So we're at a real, push and pull of these things. And I don't know if other people are going to see that. And that becomes, again, the weakness of this asynchronous format, where I look at these and I can share you my images. But the weakness is I can't hear what other people are saying, and getting more input and getting you more input on this. So, and that, of course, is all about technically evolution and education, very much as I'm talking about this rural farm evolution, and the struggles they're doing are almost reflective in our education sense, and the online teaching is reflective and analogous to what the farmer struggles versus education is struggling with. I don't know if I'm giving you a lot of art insight into this. They're beautiful photographs, but I connect them to larger ideas and larger struggles, and I guess for me that's a value in that. I'd really be curious to hear what other people are seeing and thinking when looking at these images, if they get anywhere near what I see, or if this is just sort of my perspective on things. But take value and take pride in the fact that you're creating really well, strongly composed images. There's a beauty to them. There's an aesthetic to them. There's a contrast to them. There's a nostalgia to them. Now, what are they doing in the new? I don't know, if we look at the art world, postmodernism, photomodernism, whatever the heck we want to call our current state of art or current movement of art. Are these new? Are they pushing something new? I don't know. I mean, I see more nostalgia, and I don't necessarily see a new aesthetic or a new consideration or something I haven't thought about. But I am connecting them to different ideas and larger things. But that's also taking a very large look at, teaching, farming, rural, photography. I'm bringing lots of things into this. But I can also just look at these images, They're pretty. They're beautiful. They're thoughtful. They're composed well. There's such a strong use of color, and I can't underestimate. You make that look so seamless and easy, but that is such a struggle in there. So, and beautiful textures, and wonderful textures, and color, and a nice use of reflection. Very well considered, very well composed. and presented. The body of work flows I don't feel jolted by any images. I don't feel this sense I need to rearrange photographs. So there's a strong presentation with these images and a good consideration of how you're organizing them. And again, nice textures, nice look. I keep looking at these, and it's like watching an episode of American Pickers, There's all this old and this new and this value and this beauty and, that sense of nostalgia and we tend to not think America's great right now. We need to make it great. And this takes us back to that time perhaps when it was great. And then what was that time and what was going on? What was going on technologically that we were great? What was going on rurally that was great? What was going on farming that was great? What was going on education that we were great? What was going on with photography that we were great? What made it great? If we're not great now, we need to look back reflectively as to when we were great. And then do these become sort of that metaphor for us not being great and looking back nostalgically? I don't know. It's interesting. What a beautiful composition, though, this is. You give me lots of beauty to look at and to consider and to contemplate and to think about. But then my mind is stuck in the issues and problems of the now and connecting these images to those issues. And I don't know if that's a corruption of these images, a corruption of your intent, or not, or if that's what we should be doing. I don't know. Lots of interesting philosophical questions, and to me that's what art is about and photography is about. And you've given me a lot of visual fodder here for which my mind can go in a lot of different directions. And maybe that is the baseline where maybe these images are going to reflect back on the people. And that's what I think happens with very abstract imagery. And that's why a lot of times people don't like abstract expressionism. They don't like, modernism because it is so often abstract and non-objective, and people don't like it because what that leaves them with is they have to reflect in themselves and find meaning in themselves about it. And that can be really, really challenging. As you can see, it's probably not challenging for me because I've been looking at this and doing this for a while, as perhaps you have. And so it's easy to reflect on that. And I find that value in that reflection. These images I can look at just pretty and beauty, but then I reflect deeper. They leave me a lot of space to look and my thoughts to flow and to connect different elements together. So anyways, that's where I'm at, Jessica. And be curious to see, like I said, what other people say. So if you have any questions or thoughts, let me know. Thanks for taking the class. I hope you found something out of value.